Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Orlando, Florida. I got my main man here, Mr. Jude. This is my grandson. He wanted to talk a little bit about Israel. See, we're so close to the coming of the Lord. Everyone has to be ready, even the kids. That is one thing about the coming of the Lord. It doesn't matter if you're 5 years old or 35 years old. People need to hear how close they are to the coming of the Lord. So we're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, specifically the signs for the Ezekiel 38 war, because the rapture is signless, but the second coming has tons of signs. What do you think, Jude? Should we talk about that a little bit? So we get into this every week because Jesus rebuked the crowd only one time because they didn't know their hour of their visitation. But he rebuked the Pharisees over and over and over again. So he wanted them to know. He said, you can tell what the weather's going to be, but you don't know your hour of your visitation. So let's pick up with what's happened this last week. You know, we had such a great time in Live Oak, Florida last week. We had a great time in Jasper, Alabama. Then we were in Oakland, Iowa. So many hungry people about the coming of the Lord. But man, I'm glad the EDU's coming to you maybe a few hours later today, because last night there was a massive rocket barrage on the Golan Heights. Iran fired 4 missiles at Israel's Golan. Israel's Iron Dome took them out. Well, Israel retaliated. This was because of some bombing going on in Damascus. Israel took out some caches of weapons. But this morning, as we speak, right, Jude? What do you think? This morning, the Israeli jets took out dozens of Iranian targets in Syria. They took out surface-to-air missile batteries, took out some of their weapons depots, even took out one of their bases for their command and control. I mean, you've got radical things happening. We're talking dozens of targets that Israel took out this morning. They took them out because all those nations are trying to attack Israel, so Israel's having to protect itself. Along with that, the area of the Golan Heights, America finally recognized Judea and Samaria being Israel, because Israel wanted to rebuild some settlements there. And what happened was, under the Obama administration, Kerry said that land is not Israel's, it's occupied territory. Well, America this last week reversed that, saying that land is Israel's, and that's a huge deal, because that's the area where they're trying to mark all of the weaponry and all the goods made in the West Bank. It was interesting that the Palestinians came out and said, don't just label them, don't buy them at all. And now listen how crazy that is, because what that does is it ruins all the Palestinian jobs. So if you shut down those factories, the Palestinians have wonderful jobs there in the West Bank. So it's amazing how they overreact, and it hurts the Palestinians. So you have a lot of things that are destiny for the end times happening with Iran up in Syria too. You have Russia coming in and taking over a whole base that the U.S. had. They're bringing tanks and planes and missiles right into Syria, because, you know, people don't realize that Russia's going to attack Israel right after the rapture of the church. So there's a setup for all that. Another thing that happened this last week was the UN, 154 nations, had a vote to not call the Temple Mount the Temple Mount. They want to call it by its Muslim name. So see, that's stuff that's going to happen for the tribulation, pushing to make the Temple Mount not be Israel. So that's happening. So much more anti-Semitism stuff keeps happening every week that I don't even get into. But we're so close to the coming of the Lord. It's very, very, very exciting. So not only do you have foxes show up on the Temple Mount, fish show up in the Dead Sea, you've got Russia and Syria doing the things that the Bible said they would do right before the coming of the Lord. So how blessed are we to watch the setup for this? So we always go back to the Scriptures. Let's look at the signs. Jude, you ready for the signs? Because Jude knows the signs. Israel made a nation. Jerusalem won back. Hebrew language restored. Ethiopian Jews brought back. Fertility of the land of Israel. You got the revival of the Roman Empire. You have all these tangible physical signs that are pointing to Jesus about to come back. So what does that tell us? We're about to see the Lord. Well, let's go through some more of them. You had, like I said, fish showing up in the Dead Sea, foxes on the Temple Mount. You have animals getting in position, 172 different species of predatory birds, because God's going to call on the fowl of the air to clean the land up. And then 7 years later at the Battle of Armageddon, he calls on the fowl of the air again. So you got birds in place, you got fish in place, you got all these different things that God said would be there right before the coming of the Lord. It's so exciting, isn't it? So then you go from that to signals. You had blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles. Amazing. And 4 in a row. When's the last time you had 4 blood red moons in a row on Passover and Tabernacles? 1967, when Jerusalem was won back. 1948, when Israel's made a nation. And 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion. I know that's a lot of info, isn't it? But it's really cool. And then you had the Bethlehem Star last year. Yeah, you had stars show up, planets aligned for the birth of Jesus. And then it showed up this last year. First time in 2,000 years. Yeah, first time in 2,000 years. Pretty amazing. Then you had Mercury do a flyby of the sun, and it does that about 5 times in a century, but it went down directly over the Temple Mount. And so you got all these tangible physical signs showing us Jesus is about to come. What do? We accelerate. It's not an escape theology, it's a go for it theology. What do? Help your local church, help your local pastor. This is it. Jesus is about to come back. So let's don't let the signs slow us down. Let's let them speed us up to do the will of God. We have a lot to do in a short period of time. We got to get the gospel to all the world. What do you say? Let's do it. You want to? Hey, thanks for watching this week. We'll see you next Wednesday. God bless you.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the EDU at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.
One love to overshadow.